Walter, how
You beautiful motherfuckers. Welcome to another fine edition. I have my dear friend here with me, Leora Walter, who actually lives here in La Paz with me. So we hang out lots in person, that fancy thing. We're not just Zoom buddies. Um, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring her on is since I've met Leora for probably, I don't know, like a decade, maybe, I don't know, a long time, is she's parlayed her marketing experience to be able to turn her stuff into monthly consulting rather than having the deliverable of being agency work. And I can tell you, like, when I used to do SEO, the worst part of SEO was actually fucking doing SEO. And since then I've done like a whole bunch of consulting deals, and there's so much more enjoyable. And so I want to kind of pick Leora's brain and say, firstly, Leora, let's say hello and welcome to everybody.
Hey everyone, how you doing? Happy to be here.
So a couple of things that I just wanted to mention to you guys. Like, I think this will be really useful for you guys who kind of hate the delivery side of it and wish you could just, like, focus on the getting clients and have something that's kind of more scalable. Like, one of the things is when you run an agency, if you're not careful, it's very, very easy to be like somebody's underling, which can often mean reports and meetings. And of course, for certain clients, it's just like, it's never good enough. It's never fast enough. It's never cheap enough. You're doing all the implementation. You get all the blame. When shit's not working, you're the first to be cut. Clients can be terrible at closing leads. They blame you. And often you have to fix other things other than your core thing. Like if you're doing SEO, often their website and the reviews are broken. Or if you're doing AdWords, their offers and their copy are broken. And so you always like get into these sidetrack issues that you got to kind of fix. And of course, there's all kinds of emails and being on call. And one of the beautiful things that Leora has figured out here is that by doing it as a consulting, it works really well if you just love doing the strategy, but you don't want to be in the trenches and have to be doing all the implementation. And you're getting more paid for your knowledge and not necessarily the grunt work of the doing. And as a general rule, like, you're seen as deeply valuable and you're a trusted advisor, and you don't always have to like be chasing new stuff. So it's in some ways it's a more scalable business model, and you get to actually, like, I think maybe we should start here, Leora, because you mentioned this to me in person last time, that you kind of get to boss people around, right? Like, usually when you're the agency, you're the one being bossed around, like, where's my damn AdWords? But it's the opposite. It's like, why haven't you implemented the damn AdWords? So I wonder if you could just talk real quick about like how it's a very much like a role reversal from what you.
It really is. It really is, Frankie, a total role reversal. And it's so satisfying, I have to tell you, to get paid an amazing amount of money. And you can start small, but again, big companies don't start small in terms of dollar amount and fees. Smaller companies you can, but the beautiful thing is you get paid to hold them accountable, not them holding you accountable. Oh, where are the leads? It's an incredible sort of revelatory experience. And as you go through it, you realize that the value you actually bring and your expertise, the expertise that your people already, no matter what they offer, whether it's Google AdWords, SEO, a combination, all of that expertise brings a knowledge that the business owner doesn't have. So if I just take a step back and say, I guess consulting is sort of like a shift away from being told what to do and from sort of guaranteeing results and then defending the performance or lack thereof.
Yeah.
So you'll find like it's really, different than what you experience as like in an agency where you're offering services model.
Yeah.
And, again, I started off,
sure, right? Like I just can say, it's like, it's a higher perceived status as a consultant. It's like, oh, the consultant's here and we trust the recommendations. As an agency owner, you can recommend shit all day long, and they're like, all right, just go build the damn website,
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. And instead of them asking you for like reports and, dealing with them when you do have a call or whatever, and they say, well, where's the ROI? I spent X amount on the budget and I only, got, half back in return from the, LTV of a client. You're actually the one, again, holding them accountable. You're literally paid to assess their performance and their progress. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. And the best part is that, like, it's really not a huge leap.
I wanted to actually start with you there, because that was kind of the first question I had on deck, because we kind of had a poolside conversation about this with my little girls running around and you were all sweet swimming with them. And one of the things we were talking about is for a lot of these people, it's like, why be a consultant at all? Right? Like you probably don't wake up and think like, I want to be a consultant. And one of the things that you said to me that I thought was really, really wise is like, you're already doing consulting. You're just not being paid for it, right? Like, I wonder if you could give some examples of how these people are actually doing consultant for work for clients, and it's just like not obvious that it's consultant work.
So this ties into exactly how I sort of started and transitioned. I started early 2000s. I was probably one of the first 1,000 or 2,000 people who were certified as a Google AdWords specialist. And so I was doing Google AdWords.
Yeah. Said, the PPC hero.
Yeah, really. I was doing Google AdWords, and I started to realize that large companies were spending a shit ton of money on Google AdWords and not knowing how to have a strategy behind it. I mean, back in Canada, Canadian Tire was one of the people that I would, model. And I went in to see them and I said, like, you guys are congratulating yourself for doing an extra, $300,000 in your actual store. I'm not talking globally, but I was talking like in Quebec, but in your absolute store. Meanwhile, that you did $300,000 in net profits after spending $750,000 in your Google AdWords. You need to come to my 2-day seminar. And that's how I started, right? With that. And then they were like, oh, what do you mean we spent $7? So the consulting part is when you
real quick, because I just want to share. One of the things I love about consulting is, as an agency, like, brutal honesty is not welcome, but as a consultant, it is. Like, if I say to a client, you're fucking shit at answering your phone, as an agency, they're like, oh, how dare he insult my, but as a consultant, they've paid you to tell them the truth, right?
That's absolutely right. In fact, let me give your audience and all of you guys, you agency people, I have a tremendous amount of respect for everything you do. I was there and I know it's a grind, and you could love what you do. I loved doing websites and SEO and paid ads. I did. It got tiresome after a while, but you can still do a little bit of that and dabble in there if you need to. But when you're a consultant, you're going to need 3 things as a person. Number 1, you're going to have to be comfortable with uncertainty. Number 2, you're going to have a deep-rooted belief that you can figure anything out and come up with new solutions to complex problems. So I know for Frankie, for somebody like me, that's not difficult. That second one for sure. First one, being uncomfortable with uncertainty. There's ways around that if you like.
We're all entrepreneurs. We're used to
in a row, right?
Some level of uncertainty.
And then the third in that one, and this is just for being effective as a consultant to start with, is you need to be able to provide accurate, compassionate, but candid feedback. Exactly to your point.
Yeah.
Compassionate. Now, I want to tell your people, compassionate.
Yeah, you don't want to be abrasive.
Empathetic.
Yeah.
Not empathetic.
Yeah.
Right. You need to be compassionate, but you can't sort of like, oh, I understand where you're coming from. And you're not there. You're there to build a relationship, like Frankie said at the beginning, as a trusted advisor. That comes after. And I can help, later on as we'll talk, I'll give you guys some sort of soft suggesting to current clients you have, or even, cold calling or clients that you want to go visit and you think would be a good fit for a consultant. But yeah, so those are like the 3 main things that
we talked a little bit about this in person, but you mentioned that, like, if you're building a website, almost always they're handing you like a broken message. And that's really the deeper issue with the website, and you're consulting them on the message. Or if they hand you a PPC campaign, almost always they're giving you a broken offer and you're consulting them on the offers. Or if, they bring you an SEO campaign, their points of differentiation and their reviews and things like that are always lacking. And so you're consulting them on how to do those things. So almost always what people don't realize, like, as you mentioned, like, you're already consulting. Like, it seems like this big leap of how would I do those things, but the only difference is when they've specifically paid you to be a consultant, they generally listen better to those things. Like when you say, like, if you're doing, say, SEO, and you say, like, listen, brother, you need some reviews. Like I can't work magic here if nobody's ever reviewed your company. When you say that as an agency owner, they're like, well, go get me some, right? It's your job, it's your responsibility. And if it's not done, they're going to blame you. As where when you do that as a consultant, they're like, yeah, you're right. How do I get reviews? And they're much more open to that kind of feedback. Yeah, I would just wonder if you have
Right.
any other examples just for some of our people, or those are kind of the best examples of what you see of like, already doing consulting and not getting paid for it.
Well, I mean, so many things that you talked about. Oftentimes when I was in my agency, or I would actually, because we're results driven. And if you've got clients that are paying you per month, or, yeah, and you're on that cusp month, perhaps they paid you 3 months in advance and now you're on that third month, and last month's call, they weren't so thrilled with the results. So this month, that you're putting together offers, and or you're doing their website, and you're both, and the wording and the copy isn't very good. So you'll start taking on, this is what I did. I'll start taking on and using my expertise, wordsmithing, and I'll start, changing a little bit of their copy on their website. And because I know that if I do, then the offers are going to match, and I have a better chance of giving them the results they're hoping for, and then they're going to sign on for another 3 months or 6 months, whatever the deal was, right? So you start doing things for free, taking your time, and then you start looking around and going, man, I can't scale this agency.
Yeah.
I can't do, and if you're good, it's great. If you're good at copywriting and SEO and website design and, website, just WordPress, whatever it is you're working on, great. But the problem is that it becomes on your shoulders. Then you do great results because you did the copywriting, and you made sure that, you linked whatever you told them to get some.
Yeah. And I
reviews,
think
and
part of that, all you're describing to me stems from what the client thinks their issue is and what it actually is, are very rarely the actual, like very rarely is their assessment correct. Like I've had tons of clients over the years who think, for example, if I just turn on Facebook ads, I'll be rich, kind of thing. Like they don't say that out loud. They don't say I'm going to be rich, but they think that I just have a traffic problem. And they always have like an offer conversion problem in disguise. And of course, if you're going to make the Facebook ads work, you actually have to be simultaneously like consulting them to fix the real issue. And with the consulting thing is you can attack the real issue more directly. Like I've had a guy in my mastermind who just comes to mind, and before we started really kind of honing in his offer and his deliverable and helping him scale a little better, he told me almost every single time like a client handed him a website, the website was broken. So he's like, I became a web designer by proxy, right? Like I had to just take it out of their hands and fix it, because there was all these optimization issues and speed and loading and points of differentiation, and the message sucks. So I'll get them to number one, and then they'll just blame me that the phone isn't ringing unless I do these other fixes, right? And those are just perfect examples to me of like, you guys are already doing consulting. So like that, I think that's the first thing to wrap your head around, is like consulting sounds like a new thing, but it's really not.
Right. And when you're doing consulting, like Frankie said before, in that kind of way, well, your website isn't good and it's low. All of a sudden, you've got to explain why low or slow loading websites are a problem, and Google algorithms, and the Google algorithm change. And you're like, oh, and they don't want to hear it. And you really don't want to have to explain it either. And it becomes this whole circle of, instead of working together, and, it's like, you're always trying to prove in an agency model, in those circumstances, why what you're doing is so valuable for their business. Every single month, and like I said from the beginning, this is a shift. You go in there and you say, hey, listen, Bob or Bill, I've been working with you or in your industry for X amount of time, and I've got a really good understanding of your particular business, but also the overview of your industry. And I've branched out, and I've started, this is like a soft sell. I've started to, offer consulting, and I feel like you guys, or your XYB, whatever their company name is, would be a great fit because of, and here's the key to the soft suggest, I call it, find out the reason that, and it already, just write it down or start with that, find out the reason where their bottleneck is. So despite perhaps your great SEO and your great offers and a lot of people lead gen, where are the bottlenecks? Start with that. Say, hey, Bob, look, we've been working together for 6 months. Here's the bottleneck. I do consulting. I know. And I mean, this is your way in, to getting those consulting and being paid.
Can I just add a
Well.
little story on that? So one of my pain points for years is I did a lot of lead generation, and this is not really new to anybody here, but if you work with local businesses, they're like, dog shit horrible at the phone on a good day, meaning they don't answer the phone.
Exactly.
They can't answer basic questions. They don't sound very enthusiastic to talk to people. They don't know how to close. People like are practically begging to give them money and they don't know what to do. And I remember there was a really famous guy in my industry. He's the godfather of TV. His name's Harlan Schillinger. And I was really actually flattered. Harlan recommended me to a lawyer who was interested in getting his phone consulted and just wanted to know like what kind of my rates and stuff were. And I remember there's a thing lawyers say and local businesses say, which is, I close 100% of the deals I want. Like if it's a deal I want, if it's a good lead, I close it. And if you know anything in practice, that's total bullshit. It's more like 35% on a good day. But nonetheless, I decided to call his law firm, and I just pretended to be a prospective client and said, oh, I hurt my back in an accident. And I watched his staff fumble and bumble, and I recorded the thing and hung up the call. And then I sent him the recording. And about, I don't know, 2-3 days later, I had a $40,000 year-long consulting gig, which was fucking ecstatic. And all I had to do was once a week tell him why he was shit at answering the phone so he could convert it. He was a big firm spending a lot of money. And it was such a beautiful thing for me because I had known for years at this point that these businesses were terrible at the phone, but now they were paying me
Amazing
to tell them the truth about it. And they were open about it. And my only deliverable was once a week, I would jump on the phone for an hour and we would listen to some call recordings together with their staff. And we would just point out where the things were going astray. And it was really, really amazing. And I'll tell you, it's such a relief when you get to address those underlying real issues, which you don't always get to in agency work because it's like, just get me traffic. Well, your traffic's not going to convert. I'll get you traffic, but you're going to find out. And so like you mentioned the word bottleneck, for a lot of local businesses, that bottleneck is obviously the phone. But the minute you're like, as a consultant, you can address the bottlenecks head on, and they're happy to actually pay you to address the bottlenecks. And for some reason, when they're paying you to do it for you, they don't want to hear about those other issues. Like, just do your job, man.
It's amazing. That's an amazing, all of the people that are like in your group should listen to that. Just send a call out, show them their bottlenecks, so to speak. Now, in that case, that's amazing. A $40,000 deal for a year, just based on something that you already knew was going on. And then there's deep dives in consulting also, where you've got long-term clients and it's more than just one thing. And, you're not taking I guess the difference between also an agency and consulting is you're not looking at the company in a silo. Okay, here's the marketing and here's SEO versus paid traffic. As a consultant, you're sometimes, depending on the company and what you've discovered based on questions. So there's a questionnaire. So at the beginning, there are some deliverables for yourself anyway. You need to do, let's say, a little bit of a deep dive or a shallow dive. You ask some questions so that you could pinpoint where they want to go, what the goal is of the business,
it's collaborative,
where they're lacking. Right, exactly. It's sort of a consultative, discussions.
Yeah.
So, but you're paid for that. So in my instance, I'll be paid depending on the state of the company, to be honest. If the company is really struggling in a lot of different directions, and I can see just by the first call, then I'll have probably 2 consultative calls of an hour per week. Obviously, it's more expensive, for an hour each week, so versus 1. And then, the deliverables for me are always innovative strategy. Everybody will
let's come back to that in a second, because I got a little bit of an agenda sketched out first, but I want to go actually a little bit before that, because one of the things we talked about is some of your agency clients can make for really good consulting deals, and that's actually probably the easiest place to start, but some of them won't. And consulting, because it's a little bit of a different animal, there's probably a little bit of a different client criteria. I'd love to hear a little bit about like kind of what your take is on that, and I'll be happy to share mine with our people. But I found, like, as we said, I don't think it's a good fit for that. Like if you're building a website and doing a little basic SEO for like a plumber, a single little plumber, he's probably not going to pay you to consult him. Maybe he will. I'm not saying it's impossible, but as a general rule, probably not. But there's kind of like a little bit of a different like client criteria. I'd love to hear yours.
Well, so I agree with the plumber. I mean, what are you gonna consult him on? Hey, make sure that, you're wearing pants that don't show your crack when
Yeah.
you're bending down under their,
You got
under
shit
their
on your arm
faucet.
at the last house. Wash it off.
Exactly, right. So what are you gonna consult them on, really? And even if you manage to sell it, like if you're scared and you want to start with some guy that and he's gonna probably take it, at least give yourself a fighting shot, because that plumber, even if he's gonna take you for a month or two, right? It's not a long-term problem or conundrum or business model shift that you need to get. So again, some of the criteria would be understanding your clients. So go through all the list of your clients that you've ever had, even if some of them aren't working with you now. This is a really, to reactivate them and find out the clients that you felt were maybe the most pain in the asses, because they had so many sort of broken elements and pieces were just, disjointed. Go back and offer them your services. They are sort of the lowest hanging fruits, and you're not out offering your SEO or website, you're offering your consulting services and say, hey, listen, we worked together for X amount of time. I cared about your company and I know your company really well. And I've thought about you for, a long time, and I've got some great solutions if, whatever in your way, and go ahead and approach them with a soft sort of suggestive sell. This is what I do now. I'm really good at it. I know your industry, and we can do some amazing things together and scale your business.
Yeah.
So for me, consulting could be for almost any business, 5 people and up. When you get to the L'Oreals and Hewlett Packards that I've consulted with and the big boys, there are other deliverables that you need to go deep dive. So you're looking at least probably anywhere from 6 months to a year of a contract with those people.
Right.
And it is more of a deep dive. So
Yeah.
I would say if you're just putting your toes into the consulting realm, go for your comfort level, which is, the small, medium, maybe sized businesses that you're already working with, that you already have expertise in. You understand the industry, the keywords, so you minimize the learning curve and research curve for yourself.
I actually, I really like what you said about starting at least 5 people. I think that's a good starting place. I actually think this is true in the agency space as well. Like, you're better off working with companies that have some flow and some staff and some employees in general, but you can certainly build a website like one off and do some SEO or some pay-per-click for just like a single lawyer, if I was in my niche, or, a single dentist who works for himself. But generally those people don't make for good consulting, and not because there's anything wrong with them or anything like that. It's just, there's just not enough flow to their business that it would even make financial sense to bring in a consultant. As you mentioned, that when you start getting 5 people or 10 or 50 or 100, there's more moving pieces. And as you mentioned, more people, more problems. It's going to be more disjointed, and those constraints are going to be more meaningful too, right? Like, for example, like, you think about it, like a $40,000 contract to talk for an hour a week may sound like a lot to some people, or, some people it's nothing, but to the ones it sounds like a lot to, it thinks, why would they do that? Well, they're getting 50 phone calls a day, and like, that's a make or break element. And they're losing that every fucking week by not being able to, correctly address this point. And so having skilled expertise to be able to do it and to be able to, help them get over the hump and solve those problems. The other thing too is when you're consulting on it, they're responsible for it. So they understand, we have to be the ones who actually implement it. So you're just pointing them what they need to do. And it's really, really, like I said this earlier, but it is really, really awesome that you go like, hey, are you done with this thing yet? Have you guys got your script in place? Like, what are we waiting for on that script? Right? Like, quit lollygagging.
Well, I also want to bring in something else, Frankie, that we're not even really discussing. I mean, we could go on and on. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 20 years. But the other aspect is, it's not just about lead generation, and this is about innovative strategies above, and it could even be about, as you start talking to your client and he's maybe the CEO of a 100-person team or 200, you're going to start to maybe, because you take notes, right? And so you're going to start to
They
realize
want to
that
be ahead of the curve, right?
well, right. And so you might ferret out as a salient point that there are internal dynamics between the sales team, because the processes of compensation, and bonusification, if you will, are built in such a way that that the sales team is competing with each other and not helping each other.
Yep.
And so this becomes now a process that you can consult with and change a business model, change.
Yep.
So it's not just about lead generation. This is actually where you become, so again, the trusted advisor. When you can pinpoint things out like this that have been neglected or not even on their radar,
Yeah.
you start becoming more and more their trusted advisor. So earlier I talked about the 3 things that you needed to make to be an effective consultant. I'll give you a couple of things, 3 more things to be an amazing consultant. Number 1, obviously, it's the ability to position yourself as their most trusted advisor.
Yeah.
This will ensure that you're making, thousands of dollars a month, like forever.
Yeah.
Number 2 would be,
And they say thank you at the end of that too, by the way.
yeah, they say thank you. And
Agency
and
clients
believe
don't
me,
say thank you for taking $3,000 from us this month.
no,
But
exactly. Even if you bring them
consultant clients
$100,000 worth of work, worth of like business.
Yeah.
You also have to have immediately applicable ideas and not just concepts. And again, one day maybe we'll do a second part of this. I'll go really in a deep dive of that, because that does get like as a really interesting topic. All your people that are listening, all your agency people will love that topic. And number 3 is you have to have the ability to ask questions that challenge their pre-existing biases and the status quo of their attitudes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a quick example on that, Frank.
Please do.
I never talked about this, but like I once had he was a prospective client, and he was telling me that, he wasn't looking to reinvent the wheel. He just needed to scale his business 5x as cost effectively as possible within 2 years. And I listened to him go on and on. It was probably 10, 15 minutes, could have been a little bit longer than that, about why some of the great initiatives that they had undertaken in the past 2-3 years weren't really generating the dreamed about results. And anyhow, when he finally paused after lamenting this marketing agency and that, how much money he spent here and to no avail and everything, I just asked him, why not? And he's like, well, what do you mean, why not, Leora? He's like, I just told you why I didn't get the expected results. I said, no. I said, I mean, why aren't you looking to reinvent the wheel? I said, how else are you going to stand out in a crowd and show your company's value? In one fell swoop, if you could sort of reinvent the wheel, and I want you guys to all to listen to this. I'm not telling you you've got to start, figuring out how to make a metal wheel, or I never tell that to a company either. But if you can somehow reinvent the wheel in one fell swoop, what you can do, and I told this to this gentleman, in one fell swoop, if we find a way to reinvent the wheel, you create a memorable brand, you create a memorable voice for that brand, and you position your company in a market that will set you apart from everything. So you could do 3 things with an amazing sort of go-to-market strategy or concept. And so he said, wow, that's very interesting. What are you suggesting? He wanted me to give him the idea, right? I said, well, I'm suggesting that you hire me. And so he did, right? But just
I just
reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. When you say reinvent the wheel, that's a little bit scary, but what to me, what you mean by that is you have to innovate a little bit at the very least. And a lot of times that's a scary thing to people because everybody wants to follow the proven path, the safe path. But a lot of times what is innovative to one group is really fucking obvious in another group. I'll give you a really simple example. In our world, everybody knows TikTok is fire right now. But I'll tell you, when I go to the lawyer space and tell them that there even is a TikTok, they're like, what? There's a TikTok? I only know about this Facebook and this YouTube. You're telling me TikTok's blown up? That sounds like, oh, I'm way out there and I'm innovative and I'm trying something no other lawyers, doing. But
right.
At the same time, to you and I, we've heard about TikTok for a fucking year and a half, right? So a lot of times what's innovative in your marketplace is not like really reinventing the wheel. It's just new to them and exciting to them. And so it's not always like you got to come up with this thing. You just want them to kind of be ahead of the curve. Switching gears a little bit here. I wanted to talk to you about this because probably one of the questions, at least I think people are going to be asking here to themselves, is like, okay, I can see who I could potentially approach for consulting. I can see why I would want to do consulting, but like, what would I actually deliver? And I think you hit on something that was, I would love for you to elaborate on. You said, you have to show up with some like immediately applicable idea. It's got to like solve some immediate pain point. I can help you with this right now, not like in 6 months from now, if we, do your SEO, you could be number one kind of thing. It's like something that they want to fix right now today.
Okay, something that they want to fix right now today, Frankie, I'd be wary about, right? Because if you could fix it today, they don't need you moving forward for months.
Well, like I don't necessarily mean like the problem's going to be solved in 5 minutes, but at least they can experience a shift that's immediately applicable. Like, for example, like, it could just be like, hey, you suck at the phone and you need to fix it. Yeah, you're right. We do suck at the phone. We need to do something. That doesn't mean they're going to fix their phone problem in 5 minutes, but it means.
Right. But in order to know that, right, from the company, you have to already be working with them and know that that's what. So again, being a consultant, you have to sort of step away a little bit from the formulaic and understand that you're going to do research first. So let's just say you don't know the consulting company or sorry, you don't know the company you want to go consult with. You want to go to Hewlett Packard and say, hey, I do consulting. You can, say it in a better way than that. Yeah. You go and you do some research beforehand. You say, okay, what are their numbers now? What are their numbers marketing? What are they doing? What are their new products? You do some research and you find where you feel like, okay, so let's say in their image and printing division, which is a division I actually consulted with. So I can give you this example. In their image and printing division, year X, they did, $5 million. And then for the next 2 years, they were only doing 3.5 million, yet their costs were more expensive. Can you find that dollars online? Can you find those statistics online? Not necessarily, but what you want to do is get in front of them. So you make a call. It's as simple as that. You make a call to find out the right person and you say, hey, I've been, a fan of Hewlett Packard for a long time. I'm a consultant in this industry. And I was noticing that you're losing market share to, for instance, Kyocera. Would you like to set up a 1-hour meeting and discuss how I can potentially help you gain your market share back? So again, a soft suggest that shows them right off the bat you care about their company because you've done a bit of research. So
I think the research is the real key, because you're not walking in blind, just randomly saying, hey, I do consulting, hire me. You're saying, hey, I noticed this specific thing about your company.
That's right.
And, like you mentioned, like, we're just bullshitting a little bit here, but like, if they just came out with a new product, that might be a perfect place to start. Hey, I noticed you guys, and like on the crypto consulting, that's pretty much the pitch. Hey, I know you guys are coming out with a new product. It sounds really exciting to me. Do you want some help turning it into a thing?
I just got a couple of NFT crypto projects that I'm consulting with.
I see you blowing up my WhatsApp with it.
I've got something coming up to show you. You're gonna freak out. Yeah.
Well, let's save that for in person. I wanted to ask you about something, because we talked about this, that there's really like 2 main things people are going to pay you to consult for. One is marketing strategy, and then the other is like management and leadership. And depending on what you want to do, you can actually go both directions. If any of you guys have ever worked in like a corporate setting, you probably actually hired management leadership consultants and had workshops and days where you were paying consultants all the fucking time. You just never really thought about like actually offering that to a company. I'd love to just hear your thoughts on how you think about like delivery and how you choose one of those things, and how you kind of, because I know you've given some examples, but I really want to just take this, like, as many examples as you give so people can see themselves like actually doing this.
Again, this comes to the first point I think we talked about a little while ago, uncertainty. I don't choose, Frankie, which one or which ones I'm going to offer. I listen and determine which ones they need. And let me, caveat that by saying, while you might be talking for the most part, 90%, marketing, in the end, you always find, especially as your relationship with the management team that you're working with progresses, that it ends up always interlapping with whether it's their leadership, whether it's business model transformation. Because really in consulting, there are 8 main, I guess, classifications that you could consult on. Corporate strategy, business model transformation, digital strategy, operations, organizational strategy, mergers and acquisitions, which by the way, I never get into, economic policy, which, on occasion I'll get into, not my forte. But the digital strategy, well, often, I mean, I can't remember, I can maybe count on my hand in 20 years how the times where it didn't like intertwine with corporate strategy or transforming their business model, the organizational dynamics. So sometimes I've come in there. I mean, I went and I learned Scrum Master and Agile, right? Many years ago, because I was finding some of the bigger companies, if you guys don't know that, it's management systems and dynamics, how to actually help the salespeople work together instead of apart, just helping with dynamics. Because when the dynamics of the company and the employees in the company are all working together and you create a happy company and you do some leadership management, as we were talking about, this tends to scale bottom lines exponentially all the time. It can transform, a lackluster year into a huge year. And I've seen it over and over. So again, you go in with digital strategy and you walk out with, hey, you're talking to them about, their management strategy, the way they're leading their team, who's effective, who's not, why are they effective, why are they not effective, what can you do as a team manager, as a CEO, whatever you are, what can they do to improve that. And so that's why Frankie Consulting is so interesting. You learn a shit ton. If you're like me and you're curious and you like learning new things and not getting
just
stuck.
uncovering stones and trying to see why it is the way it is.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's interesting, right? You're never just doing one thing all the time and getting stuck. You get like a really well-rounded perspective of business and so leadership management. It's very, very rare that you go into a company that didn't know you or didn't get a referral to you who wants you to be a leadership mentor or leadership consultant for them. Very, very rare. I will say that. Pardon?
Yeah, especially if it's a like, heavy hitter kind of company you talked about, L'Oreal or a HP or whatever.
Yeah, but it's leadership management. They got to trust you to be the leader. So unless you're like you, Frankie, and you who've written some books and you're out there, you do a lot of these videos, and that a company that you're prospecting, for instance, can see what you're all about, can hear you, can see your genius and how you speak and talk about leadership and all of that. Pardon?
You know how to butter me. I'm good. I like it.
Yeah, I think you're a genius. Yeah, I love your coffee. You're awesome. You're great. So unless they can see you and you have all of those sort of credentials behind you, it's very hard that somebody's going to say, hey, listen, I don't know you from Adam, but come teach me leadership. Otherwise, they'll just go read a book. There are thousands and thousands of books on leadership management. So for the most part, the expertise of your group and agency is going to be, the entry is going to be digital strategy and like really innovative, kick-ass ways to do that. And as you're consulting them on the digital strategy, hey, why should you do TikTok and not Instagram, for instance, or whatever mix that you guys feel is the best for that particular company. As you're gaining credibility and becoming more and more trusted, then you start talking about, hey, listen, Bob, I was, as we were talking, I was noticing that there seems to be some conflict among staff.
Yeah.
You know, would you like me to come in, or I've got some really good tools, some playbooks that we can do to create, you know, better dynamics. And here's, you know, some of the ideas of,
Yeah,
you know,
it
it sort
certainly
of goes in
evolves
that.
over time. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's all related. Like, you know, I mentioned like doing the phone consulting earlier, you know, like quickly you realize that you know, their hiring process and then their training process and then the way the morale around the place, and you start to see all these things are kind of connected. I wanted just to add two things to what you said, because I think it's really powerful. Is a lot of this can sound intimidating, because in a sense, like I'll tell you, at least the two hardest things that I at least experienced personally are mostly between the ears. The first thing is thinking like how am I going to justify my value? And I'll tell you, if you actually do this in practice, sometimes the shit is so fucking obvious, it's they just can't see it because they're in it. And I'll give you like, you know, an example. This isn't necessarily like a marketing example, but I remember, you know, when I was still in the 9 to 5 world, I worked in my engineering life. I worked at a company and we were doing Japanese Kaizen manufacturing. And what it involved is we mapped out all our processes and then we started asking questions to see how we could simplify it. And I remember as part of the thing, they had a machine that they would heat treat metal in the oven. And then they would bring it over to a guy who would cut out like the really big pieces with a blowtorch, kind of machiney. And then there was a stand over here where they put all the machine. And when we mapped it out, we realized they're like, you know, 40 meters, 120 feet apart for our American friends. And literally the guy was just walking back and forth between the two machines all day. And my dumb little question was like, could you put them next to each other? Like, do they have to be that far apart? And they're like, wow, like I never thought of that. And we suddenly eliminated like an hour or two of work every day for every operator over and over for 365 days and saved them like an hour of productivity, like multiplied out to infinity. That's El Gabi saying I need some car keys. And multiplied it out to like infinity. And it was, you know, it was just like, do the machines, can you put them side by side? So a lot of times it can feel intimidating walking into a company thinking you got to show up with a super advanced strategy and ready to go. And you'd be amazed that a lot of times it's just like, it's really fucking obvious, like what they should be doing. It's like, it's really, really obvious.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's if people realize that, you know, sometimes even in your own business or my own business, we're so close that, you know, you become, you have blind spots and you miss sometimes some of the most obvious things, right? But beyond that, again, suspend judgment. As a consultant, you don't have the pressure of, oh my God, I got to come up with these kick-ass strategies now. The pressure is not there. The pressure is, look, unless you're a dunce, you're going to have inspirations that will come to you based on what people are telling you or your consulting calls. You're going to get inspiration. Then you can validate your inspiration and your go-to-market strategies for them with some process. If you want to get formulaic, you could use MECE, MECE, and there are all sorts of like different, you know, I can give you guys all of that, all the
I think
consulting
it's
tools
simpler
that you
than
might
that.
not have.
Like you said, it's more just about being curious and being like a detective. Because I just wanted to give one more quick example. I can actually think of a person, just a friend I was doing consulting for, and it wasn't like a formal consulting kind of deal. But I remember she said, I made like 20 sales in my coaching business, and I got 10,000 people to register for my webinar funnel. And so I want to make 40 sales, so I need to get 20,000 people. And I remember thinking like, well, hold on, there's an assumption there. I'm like, of those 10,000 people who registered, like how many of those watched the webinar? Oh, like only like 4,000 of them. And how many of those people who started the webinar, the 4,000, how many of them saw it all the way to the end? Oh, maybe like 1,200. And of those 1,200 people who saw it, like how many of them booked a call? Oh, I don't know, like, you know, maybe 150. And of those 150 calls, how many of them showed up? Oh, 120 showed up. And so you're closing 1 out of 6 and you got 20 people. Well, hold on here. As a little bit of a detective, I see some opportunity. Before you add 10,000 new people, you still have 6,000 people who've never even seen your webinar. You still have 9,900 people who never booked a call with you. You have people who booked a call and didn't show up. You have people who watched the webinar all the way through and you haven't like emailed them since. Like there's a lot of opportunity you're sitting on here. And those things become really, really obvious if you're just curious and you're just a detective about their business. The second thing I wanted to add, by the way, I'm kind of stealing I brought you on. I'm
No, I love it. I love it. I love it. This is why I agreed to come on with you of all people, because I know that you're knowledgeable and you understand. Yeah. And that leaves a lot less burden for me to explain everything. These are amazing insights that you're giving to your peeps, and it's important. So go on. I'm intrigued.
Well, I was just going to say, and we talked about this, the hardest thing for me personally, and I'm not, maybe it was different for you because you just got brass ovaries, but there's a thing we all experience at times called the imposter syndrome, where you feel like, who am I to be worthy to help these people? And what a lot of people don't realize is when you get on a bigger scale, like imposter syndrome gets even bigger. Like I have friends who have like 10,000 like high paying clients, and they're like, I have intense imposter syndrome. Like a lot of times people ask me, how do I get rid of that when they have 3 clients? And I'm like, no, it actually gets bigger. You just become better at managing that feeling. And I'll tell you, one of the hardest things is you walk into a company, and I've had this experience where like I'll walk into a company that's doing $30 million and I've never built a $30 million company in my life. And so the thought process is, who the fuck am I to tell them anything about business when they're like, infinitely more successful than I've ever been? And often, depending on where you're at, these companies can be like 2x, 5x, 10x, 100x, sometimes even like 10,000x more successful than you've ever been. And you have to like kind of like intensely own your frame that I have something of value to add to your business. Doesn't mean I have the whole business figured out, but I know my little corner of digital marketing better than you guys do, and therefore I can like add some value to you guys, because it's hard to think that like why would fucking L'Oreal, they've built a brand, they've got marketing, they've got commercials, they've got paid media, they have the best experts in the world. Why would they bring me in to do something like this? And the hardest part, I think, is just even battling that thought, like feeling like worthy that you have something to add to these companies. I wonder if you could share a little bit of your experience with that. Like I said, you have brass ovaries, so you probably don't even deal with it.
It's not about brass ovaries. First of all, it's I was lucky enough that, I worked with some of those companies in earlier in my career. So I had some good contacts and they knew I was, smart, or I was insightful, whatever it is. But it's more like, again, this is about mindset of consultant. I never ever frame things in those ways. So reposition and reframe. These are things I could help anybody with. And it's part of what I do as a consultant. So with even your team, anybody who wants to work with me, we'll talk about that. But I never ever think about the fact that me neither. I didn't build a $30 million a year company, but that's irrelevant. If I go into $100 million, it's not about what I've built. It's about my skill set. My skill set is I'm really insightful and I'm good at ferreting out business snags. And I also behind me have an expertise, like all your people, you have expertise. So if you've worked with dentists and you've worked with lawyers, and then you've also maybe had some some experiences with cosmetics or pharmaceutical companies or any industry, these are all things in your back, in the back of your consciousness. On top of it, you've got experience with AdWords and SEO and keyword searches. So all of these things are your unique sort of recipe that you can bring to a situation, so that when somebody's talking to you, and no, you don't know. I mean, I've gone into, pharmaceutical industries, Vanguard being one of them many years ago. And they clearly said, well, have you ever consulted with, a big pharmaceutical? And I said, no, actually, I haven't. I'm so excited for the challenge of speaking with you guys, learning a little bit of, what makes your industry different than, for instance, HP or another industry, and figuring out some really cool shit to bring to the table, and they like that answer. So again, just don't lie. I don't have imposter syndrome, because I'm not lying and saying, yeah, been around the block with a bunch of, pharmaceutical companies, and start shooting out names of Sanofi. Like, be honest, say, no, I didn't. And then say, I'm excited to learn. This is part of what, our discovery calls and our initial consultations we'll talk about. I want to see and hear. But again, if you're not a dummy, the minute that they're talking to you about, something that's particularly particular to their industry, if you have a question, ask them to, to explain, why that's different from X industry and where the competitive nature is between pharmacy. Because, in the pharmaceutical industry, for an example, it's a little bit more delicate. It's kind of like, dealing with doctors as a salesperson. If you're a salesperson, I don't know, shilling, Accutane, which is a pimple like remedy from Vanguard, by the way.
I almost took that stuff when I was in high school.
So if you're a sales rep to doctors, it's not the same. And I mean, this is how I started my career. It's not the same being a sales rep, pharmaceutical, medical. It's not the same as if you're a sales rep for, I don't know, what's a like Vichy or from L'Oreal, right? A cosmetic brand versus a really medical. Two very different things. You can't incentivize doctors the way you can incentivize, let's say, a cosmetician at the pharmacy counter, right? They get incentives. You can give them samples. You can't do that. So there are always intricacies. Don't be afraid to ask questions. There is no such thing as imposter syndrome. I'd like to tell.
And that's the thing too. It takes some practice, but you eventually realize it's not really about you at all. It's irrelevant whether you've done 300 million or $2. If you have something of value to add to them and can see something they can't. And like I said, it's a lot of times it's really fucking obvious. Like I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen Kitchen Nightmares. I'm a little bit of a Gordon Ramsay Kitchen Nightmares.
I love that show.
And he always walks into the restaurant.
But he's a beast, man.
The first question he says is, "What's wrong with the restaurant? Like, why am I here?" And
he goes into the fridge.
And he gets really no bullshit answers right away. Our food sucks. Our management's crazy. There's nothing unique about us. Like management's given up. Our chef is fucking terrible. And then he goes, "Okay, I want to see it. Show me the food. Show me the kitchen. Show me the management in action." Right. And almost always it's like really, really obvious. Like, you guys don't care. You're doing this half-assed thing. Look at your fridge. It's fucking disgusting. And you look at that and you realize like it's not that hard to figure out what's broken and to help them address it. You just got to be like kind of like, a little bit curious to know like what's according to where you're trying to go, what's broke with that. Leora, just for time reasons, I'm probably going to cut it here, but I'd like to do more than one of these if you're down, because I think this is something that for a lot of our people, it's an easy way to add.
I'm down. It's so fun.
If people are interested in taking one of their clients and kind of soft selling them the idea of like a consulting gig, and they would like to get your help on that. I know we haven't like formalized an offer or anything like that. We just kind of wanted to jump on impromptu, talk about this shit on a Saturday afternoon. But if people are interested in like kind of getting your help, what's the best way at least to like reach out to you or connect with you?
Connect with me through my email right now is probably the best way. I can set up, like I told you, I can set up a Telegram channel just for your group of people who need help. I've got a ton. If you're interested in this, if you're interested in even exploring the idea, I want to make it, first of all, easy.
Yeah, we'll put a link below the video.
Okay. But you could work with me and I could promise you any of the, whether you need, I don't know, consulting deal templates, personal one-on-one deal. So let's say you get a client, you actually get a client and you're not sure how to service them or what questions to ask, or you've done a consulting call and now you're a little bit nervous because you want to add value. I'm there behind you with my expertise to help guide you. And so we can, we can work all that out together. First, I want to give you the knowledge. I want to make sure that, you're all understanding that the most important thing you need to understand is if you have an agency and it's successful, the next step is to start the consulting. Why? Because it will free you. It really will free you from all the pain points Frankie mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, especially if you're some of us, like I find like 50% of people, I mentioned this before when we were kind of structuring this, 50% of people are really good at the delivery side. Like when I first started, I just knew how to rank websites. I had zero interest in learning about marketing or anything like that. I just wanted to be able to rank websites. And I find 50% of the people enjoy the marketing side. They enjoy like putting out offers and creating content and the kind of like, you know, client acquisition, especially if you enjoy that part, but you like, you know, the delivery like makes your fucking skin crawl because of all the things we mentioned, being an underling, being bossed around. It's never good enough. It's never fast enough. It's never cheap enough, and all those things. And it's like, it's hard grunt work. Like SEO and link building was always like terrible.
I remember those days in 2005.
Here's the funny thing. I actually, and this is the honest to God's truth, and I think you guys will find the same thing. I actually love SEO consulting. When people bring me on every now and then, I don't really advertise it, but every now and then somebody brings me on to be their SEO consultant, and I love it. And I've had clients who've like flown me out on a private jet or sorry, not a private jet, they're like first class, and they wine and dine me, and they give me this elaborate night out, and all I got to do is just look at their systems and see what's going on and make some recommendations. And you know, all I have to do is share what I know, not actually have to do it. Like they're the ones building the links, they're the ones optimizing, I'm just pointing out what the things are, and that's immensely valuable because they already have the teams and infrastructure, and they just need the guidance and the direction to be able to use it. And I think it's really, really fun. So I think a lot of you guys will find it fun. I will put a link below for Leora. I don't know if we're going to do a Telegram group or an email or whatever, but whatever it is, I'll put it below so you guys can grab it. And I would love to, before we do go, send me guys some of your questions that you have, because we're going to make at least a part 2 out of this and see where we go.
Yeah, I really want to know people's questions, and more than just questions, but if you've got fears, let's talk. I don't think anybody should fear this, especially not anybody who's already in an agency. And
if you're already doing it, you already know how to do it, but it can be intimidating to get into for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
you. It was fun chatting. You know, I love this.
Thanks for having it. Yeah, especially too, because I know you got the ocean view. I feel like I can feel it with you.
Come over.
All right. Take care, guys.